Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're back in War Thunder and we're looking at the M26 Ariete. Now the M26 Ariete is pretty much the M26 Pershing, but you will find it in the Italian tree. It is the second premium vehicle that you can pick up for the Italians before the tree is out. It's very similar to how they did the British basically, you know how they had the black prints and basically... Let's just have a look. They had stuff like the Firefly, the Black Prince, all in a bundle by themselves just before the British came out, so you could maybe get used to them before the tree was announced. This generally means that the Italian tree is going to probably come out in one of the next major updates, which is going to be really nice. But anyway, let's get into the Ariete. So what is it? Well, it's basically just a Pershing. There's no real difference between the American Pershing that you can see located here in the tree, if we just put it in here. This monster. The only real difference is some cosmetic stuff, so you see the sandbags along here, whereas on the Italian one, there are no sandbags. And also, there are some decals which you can't remove, such as this blue one, the Italian flag, the number, and also the same on the back. Even though it's kind of weird how you have an Italian flag here and then cross diagonal you have it here. So they're not directly behind each other. It's kind of interesting. You also have a nice little 48 if you could see here and a little marking at the bottom. But if you look at the armor is pretty much exactly the same as what you will find on the American Pershing, and also the armament is the same. You have the 90mm M3. All of the ammunition is exactly the same as well. There is really nothing to report home on this. The only real advantage of this Pershing is that you are able to get it fully upgraded before you have to play it, which is a massive thing for the M46, the M47, and the M26 as well for the Americans. The M26, when fully upgraded, does actually feel like a nice machine to play. It's a really good support vehicle. It's nice to use, it has a good gun, and it has the ability to penetrate some of the heavier targets which you may run into. The issue with a stock Pershing, or a stock M46, or a stock M47, is that it really struggles at its BR, unless you have the required shells in order to be able to use it. So yeah, it's nice to get it fully spaded out. It does have a 5-man crew, including machine gunner, driver, gunner, loader, and commander. Obviously, you'll have to start your crews again since it's a different nation, which kind of sucks. But it has a good enough engine, I would say. The acceleration can be kind of not great on it, but apart from that, it's okay. And, well, there's not really much to say. If you've played the American Pershing, you've played this one. Simple as that. It'll be great when the Italian tree comes out for grinding, a nice rank 4 premium. But let's get into some gameplay and talk about the Pershing in general. So the M26 in-game for me has always been a supportive tank. It is basically the tank you use if you are behind the T29s or the T26E1s. You are the guy who's going to try and bring some firepower to the line, which is those large heavy tanks. Now the big difference between the American Pershing and the Italian one is pretty much the people you get put up with. So, on the American side, you generally form up with the British, sometimes with the Russians, but hardly ever the Germans. Now, the Italian line, it pretty much sits with the Germans every single time you play. So you end up Italy and Germany versus America and Britain, or America and Russia, or just Russia in general, depending on who's playing what. So therefore, because of this, what you have to do is it's much more about what you're fighting instead of how your vehicle performs. Everybody knows who has unlocked the Pershing what it feels like. It is a decently armored medium tank with speed issues with a very nice gun which has a long reload but struggles against heavy armor. That is basically what it is. It's kind of a light, heavy tank in that way, but just doesn't have the armor. One of the biggest issues that the M26 ran into back in the day was the Tiger 2H, which you would get matched up against constantly. And if it ever get down tiered, it was actually a pretty good match for the M26. That's exactly the same for the Ariete. So with that said, your general allies that you have are Tigers, or Tiger 2s, and Panthers. And the same role applies, in my opinion, to the M26 on the Italian side as it does on the American side. You use it as a supportive tank, as a tank which isn't going to try and breach lines or push up and try and attack the enemy one-on-one. You are there for that secondary shot. When the enemy fires, you can be there to finish off the enemy when it's trying to reload. A lot of the time, when you face Russian vehicles, your reload will be longer than theirs, so therefore you will have to take the shot and then roll back and then push forward. You don't have a stabilizer, which is a bit of a shame, but your armor does stand up. The thing is, if you're fighting at 5.7 or 5.3, or at least the majority of the enemy is 5.7 or 5.3, what you'll find yourself doing is your armor actually bouncing stuff. Once you start getting into those 6.3, 6.7 matches, majority, which is where your actual BR is at 6.3, you're gonna really struggle, let's say. The caliber of gun and penetration of many rounds is just gonna floor you straight, which is really not good for this machine, meaning you can't, rely on your armor at all. Another thing to take into account with the Pershing is the fact that without a stabilizer, even though it doesn't have one, it doesn't mean you can't fire on the move. Because the Pershing's acceleration isn't the greatest, it means that you can get into situations which you are moving at a not great pace, but a decent pace, but because you're not shifting in speed that much, your gun itself will actually be kind of stable even without a stabilizer. And also, on top of this, for some reason with the latest update, it has screwed up a lot of the sounds in my ground forces. That's probably why you can't hear the 90mm. I apologize for that. It is not an issue or a bug with the tank. It is an issue with my sound mod. But anyway, back to the game. So, the general rounds that I use on the Pershing is the upgraded, I believe it's the M82 round, basically the one with the HE filler, and also the APCR round. Take 20 or 25 of the HE filler round, and 10 of the APCR. If you are in a lower bracket, as I've found myself many times fighting along Tigers, the HE filler rounds will be completely fine to go through the majority of targets that you are facing. The APCR round is there if you face stuff like T29s or T34s, and if you do face them, well, you're pretty much going to get ass blasted anyway. There's not really a lot you can do against those vehicles. Against IS-2s and IS-1s, the APCR rounds are not the greatest, because a lot of their armor is curved and therefore it bounces. It's once again, this is just an American Pershing with an Italian skin on it at the end of the day. So if you have played the American one, you know all of the trials and tribulations that you have to go through in order to do well in the thing. And obviously, starting out anew with a new Italian crew, it means that you don't have the crew that you got while going through the American line before you get to the Pershing. So maybe if you want to buy this thing, then it can give you a bit of a head start on crew skills before you get the Italian tree. It also will give you access to the Italian tree when it comes out, and I'm guessing they'll do the same thing they've done with the French tree and every other tree in the last year or so, where basically there is like kind of a closed beta, and then they'll slowly release vehicles. Well, if you get one of these packs, I'm guessing you'll be able to just go straight into it. It would have been nice to see a Italian premium tank at rank 4, which was Italian, but you do have to remember the history of Italy and where it was at. Very similar to how the French have a lot of American rank 4 vehicles, and how Italy in itself struggles at rank 4 with its aircraft. It's just one of those things. There was the Italian armistice, there was very much no production going on, and as we saw from talking about the Leoncello, that was pretty much the supreme tank design that they had at the time, which wasn't exactly great. A 1943 tank, which pretty much was made at the same time as the Pershing. But anyway, one of the issues this has compared to the Leoncello, at the BR of 6.3, the M26 does not really have a good lineup of aircraft to put with it. If you want an attacker aircraft or something like that, well, you're pretty much out of luck unless you want to use the monstrosity that is the P108A. If you want to have the bomber, then you're going to have to go back to like BR of 4 or 3.7, which is the other P108, the medium bomber. If you want a fighter, you basically have the G55S. And for some reason they made the G55S exceptionally expensive. And I've literally no idea why they've done it, but it is. So therefore, around 6.3, the BR, you don't have any comparable aircraft. And hopefully, when the Italian ground trees are added in, then we will have such aircraft. And we'll also have, you know, a supportive AA or some kind of heavy tank at this BR. It's very hard to think about the tanks that they may put in unless they look for other nations, just like they have for the M26. But overall, it is an M26. If you like the American one, you'll like this one. The fact that it comes fully upgraded is really nice, because then it's actually a comparable tank at its BR and can fight if it gets up-tiered. But overall, I prefer it in a much more supportive role than I would something else at this BR. You need to stay behind your allies and be used as that secondary gun, instead of the guy who's going to take the shots and take the hits, just like Tiger 2s and T-29s do. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.